The void of space stretched endless and cold around the Vex flagship, Eternal Conquest, as it glided silently through the darkness. Admiral Thorne stood before the massive viewing portal, hands clasped behind his back, watching distant stars blur into streaks of light as the ship moved at speeds that defied comprehension. 10,000 years of conquest had made this view familiar to him. The endless march of the Vex Empire across galaxies, systems falling one after another before their might. "Admiral!" The voice of Captain Mara broke his contemplation. "We've entered the outer reaches of the target system. Initial scans confirm 9 planets orbiting a yellow star." Thorne nodded without turning. "Proceed with standard occupation protocols. I want preliminary reports on all habitable bodies within the cycle." "As you command, Admiral." The Vex Empire had conquered thousands of species across hundreds of galaxies. Their technological superiority was absolute, their military doctrine perfected through millennia of experience. Nothing in the universe made them afraid. This was simply one more system to add to their collection, one more species to subjugate or eliminate depending on their usefulness. Behind him, the command bridge hummed with activity. Officers moved with precise efficiency between holographic displays, monitoring the progress of the 1,000-ship armada that followed the flagship. The Eternal Conquest represented the pinnacle of Vex engineering, a vessel capable of destroying entire planets, harvesting stars for energy, and deploying millions of ground troops. It had never known defeat. "Intelligence reports ready for your review, Admiral," announced Wren, sliding a data tablet across the obsidian command table. Thorne finally turned from the viewport, his tall frame towering over the intelligence officer. Like all Vex, Thorne's skin had the pale blue luminescence of beings who had evolved beyond the need for sunlight, with geometric patterns that pulsed beneath the surface, markers of rank and lineage. His eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of white light, fixed on Wren. "Summarize," he commanded. Wren, smaller in stature, but with the same characteristic Vex features, activated the holographic display between them. A small, blue-green planet materialized in the air. Third planet from the star. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Surface primarily covered by liquid water. And, Wren hesitated, inhabited by a sentient species that calls themselves humans. Thorne's expression remained impassive. "Technological assessment. That's what's unusual, Admiral. They've only had industrial technology for approximately 300 Earth years. Yet they've already achieved rudimentary space travel, quantum computing, and have established outposts on their 4th planet and natural satellite. Weapons capabilities? Nuclear fission and fusion, particle beam weapons, kinetic orbital platforms. Nothing that could challenge Vex technology. But..." Wren paused again, his voice dropping slightly. "Their rate of advancement is unprecedented in our records." Thorne dismissed this with a wave of his hand. "Every species believes itself special. Intelligence Officer Wren. Every civilization imagines it will be the one to resist us. None ever has. With respect, Admiral, I recommend we study these humans more thoroughly before proceeding with standard conquest protocols. Their adaptability metrics are off our charts. They've developed technologies in decades that took other species centuries." "Your concern is noted," Thorne replied coldly, "but unnecessary. Deploy reconnaissance vessels to their Mars outpost. Standard procedure." As Wren bowed and retreated, Thorne returned his gaze to the stars. The supreme leader of the Vex Empire had personally assigned him to this sector because of his perfect record. 10,000 years without a single defeat, without a moment of hesitation. He would not break that streak for some primitive species that had barely left its planetary cradle. "Dispatch communication to Supreme Leader Vox," he instructed the bridge communication officer. "Inform him that we have identified a new conquest and will proceed according to protocol. Estimated completion, 3 standard cycles." Nothing in the universe made the Vex afraid, and these humans would be no different. The first Vex reconnaissance ships entered the orbit of Mars silently, their advanced cloaking technology making them invisible to human detection systems. Or so they thought. In the underground command center of New Mars Colony, alarms blared as detection systems registered anomalous gravitational disturbances. 5 unidentified objects in high orbit, announced the sensor operator, her voice steady despite the implications. They're running dark, but the gravity wave detectors are picking them up clear as day. Commander Alex Reynolds moved to the central display, studying the trajectory patterns. At 45, with silver streaking through her close-cropped black hair, she had the weathered look of someone who had spent too much time under artificial lighting and not enough under real skies. "They finally came," she said quietly. "Just like the deep space telescopes warned us they would." General Hayes, the military coordinator for Earth's United Defense Forces, looked grim. "How long have we got?" "Unknown," Reynolds replied. "But we've been preparing for this moment for 15 years, ever since we detected their fleet consuming the Andromeda Galaxy." She turned to face the room of officers and scientists. "Initiate Defense Protocol Thermopylae, and someone get me the President." On the surface of Mars, nothing appeared amiss. The Vex reconnaissance vessels deployed automated probes that descended through the thin Martian atmosphere, recording data about the human outpost below. The Vex commander of the mission, Sub-Lieutenant Krex, observed with clinical detachment. "Primitive structures," he noted. "Pressure domes, solar arrays, rudimentary transport vehicles. Nothing impressive." His second-in-command zoomed in on a particular section. "They appear to have begun terraforming processes in this quadrant. Atmospheric processors, water extraction facilities." "Standard resource development," Krex replied dismissively. "They will make adequate laborers once properly subjugated. The Admiral will be pleased. This conquest will require minimal effort." As the Vex probes approached the largest human settlement, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath the settlement split open, revealing concealed launch tubes. Before the Vex could react, dozens of missiles erupted from the Martian surface, streaking toward the cloaked reconnaissance ships. "Impossible!" Krex exclaimed. "They cannot detect us through our cloaking fields." But the missiles weren't guided by traditional targeting systems. They were following the gravitational distortions created by the Vex ships, technology the humans had developed specifically for this encounter. 3 of the 5 Vex vessels were destroyed in the initial barrage. The remaining 2, including Krex's command ship, barely managed to activate their emergency translocation drives, disappearing into hyperspace before the missiles could reach them. For the first time in 10,000 years, Vex blood had been spilled in a first contact scenario. On board the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Thorne received the news with disbelief. "Repeat that transmission," he ordered, his voice dangerously quiet. The communications officer swallowed nervously. "Sub-Lieutenant Krex reports that 3 reconnaissance vessels were destroyed by the human defenses on their Mars outpost. They were detected despite full cloaking protocols." The command bridge fell silent. Such a thing had never happened in living memory. Wren stepped forward cautiously. "Admiral, this confirms my initial assessment. These humans are not like other species we have encountered. Their technological adaptation—" "Enough!" Thorne's voice cracked like thunder. "This changes nothing except our approach. They have revealed themselves as hostile, so we will respond accordingly." He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare a battle group. 100 warships. I will lead personally." "Admiral," Wren persisted, "standard protocol after unexpected resistance is to conduct more thorough intelligence gathering before—" "Intelligence Officer Wren," Thorne cut him off coldly. "Your concern has been noted twice now. There will not be a third time. The humans have chosen war. They will receive it." As officers rushed to comply with his orders, Thorne's black eyes narrowed. For the briefest moment, something unfamiliar flickered across his features. Not quite fear, but perhaps its distant cousin, doubt. He quickly suppressed it. The Vex Empire had never known defeat. This would not be the first time. News of the Martian engagement spread through Earth's United Command with the speed of quantum entanglement communications. In Geneva, deep beneath the reinforced bunker that now housed Earth's unified government, President Laura Winters addressed the Emergency Council. "The Mars defense was successful but temporary," she stated, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Our long-range sensors indicate a much larger Vex force is assembling. This was merely their scouting party." Dr. Eliza Sharma, head of Xenotechnology Research, stepped forward. "The gravitational detection systems worked better than expected, but they'll adapt quickly. We need to deploy all our prepared countermeasures immediately." General Hayes nodded grimly. "Operation Scorched Earth is ready for implementation on Mars. All non-essential personnel have already been evacuated." Winters surveyed the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from every nation on Earth. The looming threat of the Vex had accomplished what thousands of years of human history could not: true global unification in the face of extinction. "Very well," she said finally. "Commander Reynolds has tactical control of the Mars theater. Earth defenses remain at maximum readiness. May God help us all." The Vex battle group emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 100 warships arranged in the sacred geometric pattern that had heralded doom for countless civilizations. Admiral Thorne stood on the command bridge of Eternal Conquest, watching as the red planet grew larger in the view screen. Scans detect approximately 5,000 human life forms on the surface," reported the tactical officer. "Their settlement appears to be expanding beyond our initial intelligence." "Deploy suppression ships," Thorne ordered. "Standard intimidation pattern. Let them witness our arrival before we begin." 20 smaller vessels detached from the formation, descending toward the Martian surface with weapons charged. Their hulls glowed with an eerie blue light as they cut through the thin atmosphere, a sight designed to instill terror in those below. On the surface of Mars, Commander Reynolds watched the approaching Vex ships on the command center's display. Around her, men and women worked with quiet efficiency, their faces tense but determined. "They're following the playbook exactly," she noted, a grim smile touching her lips. "Arrogant bastards." Her second-in-command looked up from his station. "All personnel are in position, Commander. Civilian shelters sealed. Automated systems online." Reynolds nodded. "Transmit the surrender demand. Make it convincing." Moments later, the Vex suppression ships received an audio-visual transmission from the Martian surface. A human male in what appeared to be a military uniform appeared on their communications display. "Attention unknown vessels. This is Deputy Commander Wilson of Mars Colony. We surrender unconditionally and request terms for our survival." On his command ship, Sub-Lieutenant Krex smiled coldly. "As expected, their initial resistance was merely a desperate act. Now they understand their situation." He transmitted back, "Prepare for our arrival. Any further hostility will result in complete annihilation." The Vex suppression ships landed in formation around the main human settlement, deployment ramps extending as armed Vex soldiers marched out. They were met with no resistance. The landing area appeared completely deserted. "Life signs detected in the central structure," a Vex soldier reported. "They appear to be hiding." Krex sneered. "Flush them out. Standard subjugation procedures." As the Vex forces advanced toward the central dome of the Mars colony, sensors embedded in the Martian soil activated. The ground beneath their feet suddenly liquefied as nanomachines altered its molecular structure. Dozens of Vex soldiers sank instantly, their armored forms disappearing into what had become essentially quicksand. Simultaneously, the seemingly empty buildings around them erupted with automated defense turrets, firing high-intensity plasma bolts calibrated specifically to penetrate Vex armor. "Ambush!" Krex shouted into his communicator. "All units, defensive positions!" But there were no positions to take. The entire landing zone had been prepared as a killing field. Concealed explosive devices detonated in sequence, each blast triggering the next in a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. The few buildings that stood were not buildings at all, but disguised weapon platforms that now revealed their true purpose. In orbit, Admiral Thorne watched with growing disbelief as the signals from his ground forces winked out one by one. "What is happening?" he demanded. "The humans." The tactical officer's voice faltered. "They appear to have converted their entire settlement into a trap. Our forces are sustaining heavy casualties." Thorne's face hardened. "Deploy the second wave. Full combat protocol." Before the order could be implemented, new alarms sounded across the bridge. "Multiple launch signatures detected," the sensor officer shouted. "Incoming projectiles from the far side of the planet." "Impossible," Thorne muttered. "Our scans showed no military installations there." The projectiles weren't missiles, but something far more primitive, and yet ingenious. Mass drivers, electromagnetic launchers that hurled tungsten rods at incredible speeds. Simple kinetic weapons, requiring no advanced guidance systems that the Vex could jam. No energy signatures they could detect until too late. 3 more Vex ships shuddered under the impact of the kinetic bombardment, their shields designed to repel energy weapons, proving inadequate against the sheer physical force of the projectiles. "Evasive maneuvers," Thorne commanded. "Return fire on those launch positions." The Vex battle group scattered, abandoning their perfect formation as they sought to avoid the continuing barrage from the surface. Their weapons lashed out, vaporizing huge sections of the Martian landscape. But the damage was done. 5 Vex ships had been crippled, and the ground force was all but annihilated. In the chaos, no one noticed the small objects that attached themselves to the hulls of several Vex vessels, human drones, carrying something far more dangerous than weapons: information-gathering devices. On Earth, Dr. Sharma watched the data stream in from the Mars engagement with growing excitement. "It's working," she breathed. "The drones are transmitting. We're getting their technical specifications, shield frequencies, weapon configurations, everything." President Winters nodded solemnly. "Good. How long until you can adapt our systems?" "Weeks, not months," Sharma replied. "But we'll need to survive that long." "We will," Winters assured her, though her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. "The Mars Gambit bought us time. Now we need to make it count." In the aftermath of the Mars engagement, Admiral Thorne faced the first crisis of his long career. The battle group had withdrawn to a safe distance, licking its wounds as repair drones swarmed over damaged vessels. "Final casualty report, Captain," he demanded. Captain Mara's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her shock. 8 ships severely damaged, 3 beyond repair. Ground forces. Total loss. Admiral. Sub-Lieutenant Krex among them. Thorne absorbed this in silence. Then, "Prepare a full report for Supreme Leader Vox. I take full responsibility for underestimating the human response." "Admiral," Wren interjected, stepping forward from his monitoring station. "Analysis of the human tactics suggests this was not merely a defensive response. The entire scenario was a trap, specifically designed to engage and damage our forces while gathering intelligence." "Explain," Thorne demanded. Wren activated a holographic display showing the remains of the Mars colony. The structures were facades. Admiral. Beneath them was an intricate weapon system disguised as civilian infrastructure. And these. He highlighted several small objects attached to Vex ship hulls. "Are information-gathering devices. They've been transmitting data since attachment." Thorne's expression darkened. "Remove them immediately. Initiate security protocols." "Already done, Admiral. But they were active for several hours. We must assume the humans have obtained significant technical data about our systems." For the first time in his long existence, Admiral Thorne felt something akin to respect for an enemy. These humans had not merely resisted, they had planned, adapted, and sacrificed an entire outpost as a gambit to gain information. "Recall all ships," he ordered finally. We will regroup and reconsider our approach. This will not be a standard conquest. As the Vex fleet retreated to the outer reaches of the solar system, the Supreme Council of the Vex Empire convened an emergency session for the first time in 1,000 years. Supreme Leader Vox, his ancient form floating in a suspension field at the center of the circular chamber, reviewed Admiral Thorne's report with growing concern. In 10,000 years of expansion, he addressed the assembled counselors. We have never encountered a species that inflicted significant casualties during first contact. These humans have damaged our ships, destroyed a ground force, and, most concerning, acquired technical data about our systems. Counselor Zarel, representative of the Science Directorate, spoke up. The data they obtained is troubling. Supreme Leader, their rate of technological adaptation suggests they could potentially incorporate elements of our technology into their own within a remarkably short time frame. Then we must accelerate our timetable, declared Counselor Mox of the War Directorate. Deploy the full 7th Fleet. Overwhelm them before they can adapt. Supreme Leader Vox raised a hand for silence. Admiral Thorne's request is to increase his force to 500 ships, but maintain his independent command. He believes standard conquest protocols are ineffective against this species. Admiral Thorne has never failed us, Counselor Zarel noted. His judgment should be trusted. After further deliberation, Supreme Leader Vox made his decision. The Admiral will have his 500 ships, but the timetable is accelerated. These humans have demonstrated unusual capabilities. They must be subjugated quickly. But with minimal damage to their population and infrastructure, their adaptability could make them valuable subjects of the Empire. As the Council adjourned, Vox remained alone in the chamber, contemplating the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly before him. In all his millennia of leadership, he had never seen Admiral Thorne request reinforcements. These humans were something new, perhaps even something dangerous. For 3 months, an uneasy stillness fell across the solar system. The Vex fleet remained positioned beyond Neptune's orbit, growing in number as reinforcements arrived through hyperspace. On Earth and its remaining outposts, humanity prepared feverishly for the coming storm. In her laboratory beneath Geneva, Dr. Sharma worked tirelessly with her international team of scientists, analyzing the data captured during the Mars engagement. Their shield technology operates on principles similar to our theoretical work on quantum field manipulation, she explained to President Winters during a progress briefing. The difference is, they've perfected it. But now that we understand the underlying mechanics, she gestured to a prototype weapon on the testing range behind her. We can tune our weapons to exploit weaknesses in their frequency modulation. Winters nodded, impressed but still concerned. And their weapon systems? That's where we've made the most progress. Sharma replied with a hint of pride. Their energy weapons are incredibly advanced, but they rely on specific exotic particles for peak efficiency. We've developed countermeasures that can disrupt the particle flow, reducing their effectiveness by roughly 40%. Will it be enough? Winters asked the question that haunted everyone. Sharma's expression turned somber. Madam President, I won't lie to you. Even with these adaptations, we're still technologically outmatched, but we have one advantage they don't. What's that? They expect us to lose, Sharma said simply. Everything in their experience tells them we will surrender or be destroyed. They have no concept of what humans do when backed into a corner. On the flagship, Eternal Conquest, Admiral Thorne reviewed the battle plans one final time. His reinforced fleet now numbered 500 warships, including specialized vessels for planetary bombardment, troop deployment, and resource extraction. The plan is approved, Admiral, Captain Mara confirmed. Primary target remains their homeworld, with simultaneous strikes against their lunar base and orbital platforms. Thorne nodded, but his usual confidence seemed diminished. Intelligence Officer Wren noticed the change as he approached with updated reports. "Something troubles you, Admiral," he asked quietly. Thorne gestured to the tactical display, showing Earth and its defenses. "They've had time to prepare, yet our long-range scans show minimal orbital defenses. Either they are fools, or they have preparations we cannot detect." Wren finished. "I've been analyzing their historical warfare patterns. Admiral, they are unconventional. Throughout their history, technologically inferior human forces have defeated superior enemies through adaptation, deception, and willingness to absorb massive casualties." "No species willingly accepts destruction," Thorne countered. "That's just it, Admiral." Wren's voice dropped lower. "They don't expect destruction. Every cultural transmission we've intercepted speaks of victory and survival. They genuinely believe they can defeat us." Thorne dismissed this with a wave. "Primitive bravado. 500 ships will break their spirit quickly enough." Yet, as he gave the order to advance toward Earth, Admiral Thorne found himself increasing security protocols and defensive formations beyond standard requirements. Something about these humans had gotten under his skin, a feeling entirely foreign to a Vex commander of his experience. The Vex fleet approached Earth in a massive sphere formation, designed to envelop the planet and prevent any escape. As they passed Jupiter, long-range sensors detected unusual energy readings from the gas giant's vicinity. Scanning anomaly," the sensor officer reported. "There appears to be a human installation on Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons." "Insignificant," Thorne replied. "Maintain course for primary target." Suddenly, multiple alerts sounded across the bridge. "Energy spike detected! Massive launch signatures from Ganymede and surrounding moons." From concealed bases on Jupiter's moons, hundreds of human vessels emerged. They were smaller than Vex warships, more akin to fighters and light cruisers. But they moved with surprising speed and coordination. "Defensive formation," Thorne commanded. "Prepare to repel boarding." He never finished the order. The human ships didn't attempt to close with the Vex fleet. Instead, they launched what appeared to be missiles, thousands of them, streaking toward the Vex formation. "Primitive kinetic weapons," Captain Mara noted with relief. "Point defense systems will neutralize them easily." But as the Vex defenses engaged the incoming projectiles, something unprecedented happened. The missiles suddenly altered their emission signature to precisely match Vex energy patterns. "The defense systems are not recognizing them as threats," the tactical officer shouted in alarm. "They're reading as friendly vessels." Thorne realized with horror what had happened. "They've adapted our own identification protocols. Override defense systems. Manual targeting." The order came too late. The missiles struck dozens of Vex vessels simultaneously. But rather than exploding, they attached themselves to the hulls and began boring through, releasing swarms of nanomachines that attacked the ships from within. As the Vex fleet reeled from this first assault, a new contact appeared on their sensors. A single, large human vessel emerged from behind Jupiter itself, its design unlike anything they had seen before. "Unknown vessel approaching," the sensor officer reported. "Energy signature is Admiral. It's generating power levels comparable to our own ships." On the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, Commander Alex Reynolds watched the Vex formation with grim satisfaction. "Phase 1 successful," her tactical officer reported. "Nanite disruptors have penetrated 27 enemy vessels. Their formation is breaking." Reynolds nodded. "Bring main weapon systems online. Target the largest concentration of enemy ships. Let's show them what we've learned." The Defiance represented humanity's greatest achievement. A vessel built in secret over the past 15 years, incorporating technologies reverse-engineered from distant Vex encounters and now enhanced with the data gathered during the Mars engagement. "Energy weapons charged," announced the weapons officer. "Targeting solution locked." "Fire," Reynolds commanded. From the bow of the Defiance, a beam of concentrated energy erupted, the same exotic particle configuration used by Vex weapons, but modified in ways their scientists had never considered. The beam cut through the shields of 3 Vex cruisers, as if they weren't there, vaporizing them instantly. On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Thorne watched in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They've developed energy weapons equivalent to our own in mere months?" Wren's voice was steady but urgent. "Admiral, they haven't just copied our technology. They've improved upon it. The modulation patterns are unlike anything in our database." As the Defiance continued its assault, the smaller human vessels swarmed through the broken Vex formation, targeting engines and weapon systems with precision strikes. "Pull back the fleet," Thorne ordered, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Regroup at the secondary position. We need to reassess." But even as the Vex ships attempted to withdraw, a new threat emerged from Earth itself. Massive railguns that had been disguised as space elevators opened fire, launching projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Each impact released electromagnetic pulses specifically calibrated to disrupt Vex systems. The battle raged for hours as the Vex fleet struggled to maintain cohesion against the multi-pronged human assault. Ships that had never known damage in thousands of years of service now listed with gaping wounds in their hulls. Crews accustomed to easy victory found themselves fighting desperately for survival. Through it all, the Defiance pressed its attack, its advanced weapons systematically targeting Vex command and control vessels. In the Geneva bunker, President Winters and her staff monitored the battle through quantum-entangled communications. Commander Reynolds reports 30% of the Vex fleet has been damaged or destroyed. Her military aide reported, "Our casualties are significant, but within projected parameters." Winters closed her eyes briefly. Significant meant thousands of lives lost. Brave men and women who had volunteered for what amounted to suicide missions, buying time for Earth's main defenses. "Is it enough?" she asked. General Hayes studied the tactical display. "Their formation is broken, but they still outnumber us significantly. This was never going to be a single battle victory. Madam President, the question is whether we've demonstrated enough capability to force them to reconsider." Dr. Sharma, who had joined them for the battle, pointed to a specific ship in the Vex formation. "That's their flagship, the Eternal Conquest. Our intelligence suggests Admiral Thorne commands from there. He's the key." Winters understood immediately. "Commander Reynolds needs to target that ship specifically?" Hayes shook his head. "Not target it for destruction. Target it for boarding." Winters stared at him. "You want to board a Vex command ship? That's exactly what they won't expect." Hayes finished. "We've assembled a special operations team trained for exactly this scenario. If we can capture their admiral, we might force a ceasefire." After a moment's consideration, Winters nodded. "Give the order." On the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Thorne was forced to confront the unthinkable, a battle that could not be won through superior firepower alone. "We've lost 63 ships," Captain Mara reported, her voice strained. "Another 41 severely damaged. The human vessel continues to target our command ships with alarming precision." "Deploy the Harbinger weapons," Thorne ordered. "Target their homeworld directly. Let's see how they fight when their population centers are threatened." Wren stepped forward urgently. "Admiral, I must protest. Supreme Leader Vox specifically ordered minimal damage to the human infrastructure and population. They are to be subjugated, not annihilated." "The Supreme Leader is not here," Thorne thundered. "I will not be the first admiral in Vex history to suffer defeat. The humans have chosen this path." As the order was transmitted, 5 specialized Vex destroyers moved into position around Earth, preparing to launch planet-killer weapons capable of rendering the surface uninhabitable. On the Defiance, Commander Reynolds received the warning from Earth's sensor grid. "They're positioning destroyers for planetary bombardment," she announced to her bridge crew. "This is it, The moment we planned for. All personnel, prepare for Operation Trojan. The Defiance suddenly altered course, accelerating directly toward the Eternal Conquest at maximum speed. "They're on a collision course," shouted the Vex tactical officer. "Evasive action!" Thorn commanded. But before the massive flagship could maneuver, the Defiance decelerated sharply and released dozens of small, stealthy craft. While Vex point defenses concentrated on the larger threat, these infiltration vessels attached themselves to the hull of the Eternal Conquest at key access points. Inside, each craft were 6 human soldiers in powered armor suits, carrying weapons specifically designed to function within Vex ships. Led by Major Sarah Connor, they breached the hull and entered the massive vessel. "We're in," Connor reported over the secure channel. Proceeding to primary objective. Using schematics developed from the Mars intelligence, the strike teams moved through the Vex flagship with precision, encountering resistance but overwhelming it through surprise and specialized tactics. On the bridge, Admiral Thorn received the alarming reports. "Intruders have breached decks 7 through 12, security reported. "They're... Admiral, they appear to be heading directly for the bridge." "Impossible," Thorn declared. "No one could navigate this ship without—" "They have our schematics," Wren interrupted. "The Mars intelligence gathering was more effective than we realized." Before Thorn could respond, the massive doors to the bridge shuddered under some external force. The Vex security team raised their weapons as the doors buckled and finally gave way. Human soldiers poured onto the bridge, their armor unlike anything the Vex had seen, a hybrid of human design and adapted Vex technology. Their weapons fired directed energy pulses that incapacitated rather than killed, quickly neutralizing the bridge crew. Major Connor strode directly toward Admiral Thorn, her helmet retracting to reveal her face, a psychological tactic designed to emphasize the humanity of the invaders. "Admiral Thorn," she stated calmly, "you are now a prisoner of the United Earth government. Order your fleet to stand down immediately, or we will be forced to continue hostilities." For perhaps the first time in his long existence, Admiral Thorn was speechless. These primitives had not only damaged his fleet, but had now boarded his flagship and taken control of the bridge. It was inconceivable. Wren stepped forward cautiously. "Admiral, I recommend compliance. The situation is unprecedented." Thorn's black eyes narrowed as he regarded the human soldiers. "And if I refuse?" "Then the battle continues," Connor replied evenly. "Our forces have already disabled the Harbinger destroyers. Your fleet is in disarray, and now we control your flagship." After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Admiral Thorn made the most difficult decision of his 10,000-year career. "This is Admiral Thorn to all Vex vessels. Stand down weapons. Cease all hostile actions." His voice hardened. "Temporarily." Throughout the solar system, the great battleground to a halt as Vex ships powered down their weapons and moved into non-aggressive positions. The first major engagement between humanity and the Vex Empire had ended, not in the expected annihilation of the humans, but in the capture of the most decorated Vex admiral in history. On Earth, celebrations were tempered by the knowledge that this was merely the opening chapter in what would likely be a long conflict. But they had achieved what many thought impossible. They had bloodied the nose of an empire that spanned galaxies, and in doing so, had changed the calculus of the war to come. 3 days after the Battle of Jupiter, Admiral Thorn found himself in an unexpected situation, seated across from a human in what appeared to be a diplomatic setting rather than a prison cell. The room was aboard the Defiance, now in orbit around Earth. Through the viewport, Thorn could see his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, surrounded by smaller human vessels, its once proud silhouette now marred by battle damage. "I am Ambassador Alex Reynolds," the human introduced herself. Thorn recognized her as the commander who had led the fleet against his forces. "I've been authorized to discuss terms with you." Terms? Thorn's voice carried a hint of disdain. You have won a single battle, human. The Vex Empire spans thousands of galaxies. When the Supreme Leader learns of these events, he already has, Reynolds interrupted, sliding a datapad across the table. We transmitted a full account of the battle, along with footage of your capture, throughout the frequencies your empire uses for communication. We wanted to ensure there was no misunderstanding about the current situation. Thorn stared at her, genuine surprise registering on his features. You declared your victory to the entire empire. We thought it was important for your leadership to understand exactly what happened here. Reynolds replied calmly. Not just that we fought back, but how and why. For a long moment, Thorn was silent, processing this development. These humans continued to defy every expectation, every pattern of behavior the Vex had encountered in 10,000 years of conquest. Why am I here? He finally asked. Why not in a cell, or dead? Reynolds leaned forward slightly. Because killing you would accomplish nothing. We're not interested in revenge, Admiral. We're interested in survival. And perhaps something more. She activated a holographic display between them, showing the solar system. Your empire has conquered thousands of species across the galaxy. Some you've enslaved, others annihilated. We want to understand why. It is the natural order, Thorn replied automatically. The strong conquer the weak. The Vex bring order to chaos. It has always been so. Has it? Reynolds challenged. 10,000 years is a long time, Admiral. Long enough to forget there might be alternatives. Before Thorn could respond, the door opened and Intelligence Officer Wren entered, escorted by human guards. Upon seeing Thorn, he bowed slightly. Admiral, I hope you are being treated appropriately. Officer Wren has been helping us understand your technologies better, Reynolds explained. He's been surprisingly cooperative. Thorn narrowed his eyes at his intelligence officer. You betray the Empire? On the contrary, Admiral, Wren replied calmly. I serve the Empire by understanding these humans. They are not like other species we have encountered. He hesitated, then added, They have shown me things that challenge our fundamental assumptions. What things? Thorn demanded. Reynolds nodded to a guard, who activated another door. A small group of humans entered, but these were not soldiers or officials. They were children, perhaps 8 to 10 years old, accompanied by a teacher. These are survivors from our Mars colony, Reynolds explained. Their parents were scientists and engineers who remained behind to ensure the trap worked. They sacrificed themselves to give us the intelligence we needed. The children regarded Thorn with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, but notably not fear. One small girl stepped forward, studying him intently. You look different than in the pictures, she said simply. Thorn, who had commanded the destruction of entire civilizations without remorse, found himself momentarily speechless in the presence of this child. Why are they here? He asked Reynolds, genuine confusion in his voice. Because I wanted you to see what we're fighting for, she replied. Not conquest, not domination, but a future for them. She gestured to the children. Everything we've done, the sacrifices, the desperate adaptations of your technology, the strategies that might seem savage or primitive to you, was for them. The children were led away, but their presence lingered in Thorn's mind as Reynolds continued. Your empire sees conquest as the natural order. We see cooperation, mutual growth, the exchange of ideas. When we look at the stars, we don't see territories to subjugate. Admiral, we see possibilities. Wren stepped closer. Admiral, I have studied their historical records. Despite their brief technological civilization, they have accomplished remarkable things, not just in warfare, but in art, philosophy, medicine. They value individual life in a way our empire has forgotten. Sentiment, Thorn dismissed, but with less conviction than before. Is it? Reynolds challenged. Or is it something your empire has lost in its endless expansion? You conquer because you know nothing else. We resist because we can imagine something better. She stood, indicating their meeting was concluding. Think on this, Admiral. Your supreme leader will no doubt send more ships, more soldiers. The war will continue. But ask yourself, what are you fighting for? What does the Vex Empire gain from our destruction that it couldn't gain from our alliance? As Reynolds and the guards escorted him back to his quarters, Thorne found himself troubled by questions he had never before considered in his long existence. The image of the human children stayed with him, not as future subjects to be conquered, but as beings with potential, with futures of their own. For the first time, he wondered if there might be something in the universe more powerful than fear. 1 week later, on the observation deck of the Defiance, Admiral Thorne stood beside Ambassador Reynolds, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. He had been granted limited freedom of movement, always under guard, but treated with diplomatic courtesy, rather than as a prisoner of war. Your planet is beautiful, he admitted. More diverse than most we encounter. Reynolds nodded. Diversity is our strength. Different nations, cultures, perspectives, all coming together, especially now. To fight us, Thorne noted. Initially, yes, she acknowledged. But perhaps for something more, eventually. They were joined by Ren and Dr. Sharma, who had been working together to establish communication protocols between human and Vex systems. The translation matrix is complete, Sharma reported. We can now communicate directly with the Vex Council, without intermediaries. They have requested to speak with you, Admiral, Ren added. Apparently, our transmission about the battle has caused considerable discussion within the Empire. Thorne wasn't surprised. The capture of a high-ranking admiral would be unprecedented, a shock to the very foundations of Vex society. Before we establish communication, Reynolds said, there's something else I want to show you. She led the group to a different section of the ship, eventually entering what appeared to be a large garden dome. Inside, earth plants grew in carefully maintained beds, creating a peaceful oasis amid the sterile spacecraft. But it wasn't the plants that caught Thorne's attention. It was the group of Vex prisoners, crew members from his captured ships, mingling with human scientists and doctors. They weren't in chains or behind barriers, but engaged in what appeared to be genuine conversation. What is this? Thorne demanded. An experiment, Reynolds replied. We've been learning from each other. Your crew members have been sharing information about Vex biology, cultural practices, history. In return, we've shared our own. One of the Vex officers noticed Thorne and immediately straightened to attention. But there was something different in his bearing. Not the usual rigid Vex military posture, but something more relaxed. Your crew have discovered something called music, Ren explained, amusement in his voice. Apparently, it produces unusual neurological responses in our species, quite pleasurable ones. This is inappropriate fraternization with the enemy, Thorne stated, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Reynolds challenged. Or is it the beginning of understanding? Your empire has conquered through fear for 10,000 years. Admiral, has it brought you fulfillment? Has it brought your people happiness? Before Thorne could answer, alarms sounded throughout the ship. Reynolds immediately activated her communication device. Reynolds here, report. Ambassador, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Vex reinforcements have arrived. They rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed hundreds of Vex warships emerging from hyperspace, far more than had been present in the initial battle. The Supreme Council has sent the main fleet, Thorne observed. Your victory was impressive, human, but brief. Reynolds didn't appear disturbed by this development. We expected this. The question is, what happens next? The communications officer interrupted. Ambassador, We're receiving a transmission from the lead Vex vessel. It's Supreme Leader Vox himself, requesting to speak with both you and Admiral Thorne. Even Thorne couldn't hide his surprise. For the Supreme Leader to come personally was unprecedented in Vex history. The main view screen activated, revealing the ancient form of Supreme Leader Vox. Unlike most Vex, whose geometric patterns pulsed with blue light, Vox's markings glowed white, a sign of his immense age and authority. "Admiral Thorne," the Supreme Leader's voice resonated through the bridge. "It appears you have encountered something unique in your long service to the Empire." Thorne bowed his head respectfully. "Supreme Leader, the humans have proven unexpected in their capabilities and tactics." "So I observe," Vox replied, his gaze shifting to Reynolds. "Ambassador, your species has accomplished what none have done in 10,000 years of Vex expansion. You have forced us to reconsider our approach." Reynolds stepped forward. "Supreme Leader, we have no desire for extended conflict. We fight because we must, but we would prefer cooperation." "A curious position for a species facing annihilation," Vox noted. "My fleet could reduce your world to ash within hours." "You could," Reynolds acknowledged. "But at what cost? You've seen what we accomplished against Admiral Thorne's fleet. We've continued adapting your technologies. The battle would be costly for both sides." "And there is something else, Supreme Leader," Ren interjected, stepping forward. "Something I have observed during my time among the humans. They possess a quality I believe our Empire has forgotten." "And what quality is that, Intelligence Officer?" Vox asked, curiosity evident in his ancient voice. "Hope," Ren said simply. "They fight not merely for survival, but for a future they believe can be better than their present. It drives their innovation, their willingness to sacrifice, their remarkable adaptability." Vox was silent for a long moment, considering this. "Finally," he said, "I wish to meet these humans in person. Admiral Thorne, you will facilitate this meeting. Perhaps there is something to be learned here that 10,000 years of conquest has not taught us." As the transmission ended, Reynolds turned to Thorne, surprise evident on her face. "Your Supreme Leader wants to negotiate?" "It appears so," Thorne replied, equally astonished. "In all of recorded Vex history, this has never happened." "Then we're making history together," Reynolds said, offering what humans called a smile, a gesture Thorne was beginning to understand, represented not weakness, but a uniquely human form of connection. As preparations began for the unprecedented meeting between human leaders and the Supreme Leader of the Vex Empire, Admiral Thorne found himself reconsidering everything he had believed about strength, conquest, and the nature of civilization itself. Perhaps, he thought as he watched the humans working feverishly to prepare, there were forms of power in the universe that the Vex had never understood. Power found not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to hope, to imagine, to create something new from the ashes of conflict. And perhaps, after 10,000 years of bringing fear to the stars, it was time for the Vex Empire to learn a different way. The delegation chambers aboard the Vex flagship, Celestial Dominance, had never before hosted representatives of a species being conquered. Yet today, they were filled with both Vex officials and human diplomats. An unprecedented gathering that marked a potential turning point in the history of both civilizations. Supreme Leader Vox presided from an elevated platform, his ancient form sustained by technologies so advanced they appeared magical, even to the humans who had rapidly adapted Vex systems. "For 10,000 years," Vox began, his voice resonating through the chamber, "the Vex Empire has expanded across the stars, bringing order to chaos, civilization to primitives, purpose to randomness. Never in that time have we encountered a species that has caused us to pause in our great mission." He gestured toward the human delegation, led by President Winters and Ambassador Reynolds. "Yet you humans have accomplished this. not through superior technology or numbers, but through qualities we had dismissed as irrelevant to the cosmic order: adaptability, sacrifice, cooperation, hope. Admiral Thorne stood to the side, his position ambiguous, neither fully with the Vex leadership nor with the humans who had captured him. Beside him, Intelligence Officer Wren watched the proceedings with keen interest. President Winters stepped forward to address the assembly. Supreme Leader Vox, representatives of the Vex Empire, we come before you, not as supplicants begging for mercy, but as equals offering a different path forward. A murmur ran through the Vex officials at this bold claim. Equals? A species barely 300 years into its industrial development, claiming equality with an empire spanning galaxies? Our civilization may be young by your standards, Winters continued, undaunted. But perhaps that youth gives us perspective you have lost. We see possibilities where you see only conquest. We imagine cooperation where you demand subjugation. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's diverse ecosystems, cities, and people. This is what we fight for. Not empire, not dominion over others, but the right to determine our own destiny, to explore the stars as partners rather than conquerors. Supreme Leader Vox studied the images with ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Your words are compelling, President Winters, but the cosmic order is not maintained through pleasant sentiments. The strong survive, the weak perish. This has been the way of the universe since the first stars formed from cosmic dust. With respect, Supreme Leader, Ambassador Reynolds interjected. That is one interpretation of the universe. Our scientists have observed different patterns: symbiosis, cooperation, mutual growth. Even in the most hostile environments on our world, life finds ways to cooperate for mutual benefit. She nodded to Dr. Sharma, who presented research showing examples from Earth's natural world: plants and fungi forming mycorrhizal networks, different species cooperating in reef ecosystems, the complex relationships between predators and prey that maintain balance rather than dominance. Even the stars themselves form through cooperation. Sharma explained. Gravity bringing matter together, nuclear fusion creating new elements, supernovae seeding space with the building blocks for new solar systems. The universe is as much about creation as destruction. Admiral Thorne found himself drawn to these arguments in ways he couldn't fully explain. In 10,000 years of service to the Empire, he had never questioned the fundamental premise of Vex expansion: that conquest was the natural order, that strength justified dominion. Yet these humans, in their brief existence, had developed philosophies and understandings that challenged everything he had believed. Supreme Leader Vox seemed similarly affected. Your perspective is intriguing. In all our conquests, no species has presented such a fundamental challenge to our worldview. He turned to Thorne. Admiral, you have spent time among these humans. What is your assessment? All eyes turned to Thorne. His response could determine the fate of humanity and potentially reshape the Vex Empire itself. He chose his words carefully. Supreme Leader, when I first encountered the humans, I dismissed them as primitives, destined for subjugation like all others. I was incorrect. The admission sent shockwaves through the Vex officials present. Admiral Thorne had never acknowledged error in his long career. Their adaptability exceeds anything in our records. Their willingness to sacrifice for future generations demonstrates a form of strength we have not properly valued. And their concept of hope. He paused, searching for the right words. It is a power we do not fully understand, but its effects are undeniable. He gestured toward the human delegation. They defeated our forces not because they were stronger, but because they refused to accept defeat as inevitable. They imagined victory where none should have been possible, and that imagination became reality. Wren stepped forward to stand beside Thorne. I have studied their history extensively. Supreme Leader, throughout their brief civilization, smaller human forces have repeatedly defeated larger ones through innovation, adaptation, and what they call the human spirit. It is not quantifiable by our metrics, yet its impact is real. Supreme Leader Vox contemplated this in silence. The chamber held its breath, both human and Vex awaiting his judgment. Finally, he spoke. In 10,000 years of expansion, the Vex Empire has grown powerful beyond measure. Yet perhaps we have also grown stagnant, fixed in our thinking, limited by our very certainty. He rose from his platform, approaching the human delegation directly, a gesture unprecedented in Vex diplomatic history. President Winters, Ambassador Reynolds, I propose something that has never before occurred in the history of our empire. Not conquest, not subjugation, but alliance, partnership, an exchange of knowledge, technology, and perspective that might benefit both our civilizations. The human delegation could barely contain their surprise and relief. President Winters stepped forward, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Supreme Leader Vox, on behalf of humanity, we accept your proposal. Let this day mark the beginning of a new chapter for both our peoples. After a moment's hesitation, Supreme Leader Vox extended his hand to meet hers, mimicking the human custom. A murmur of astonishment ran through the Vex officials, their leader, whose touch was reserved for the highest rituals of the empire, engaging in physical contact with a species they had intended to conquer. As the formal negotiations began, Admiral Thorne found Ambassador Reynolds at his side. You influenced his decision, she observed quietly. Thorne nodded. Perhaps. Or perhaps he saw what I have seen during my time among your people.
And what is that, Admiral?
He turned to look out the viewport, where Earth was visible as a distant blue jewel against the blackness of space. That there are forms of strength beyond conquest. That fear is not the only force that can unite civilizations. He hesitated, then added, that hope, for all its intangibility, may be the most powerful force in the universe. Reynolds smiled. For someone who intended to conquer us a few weeks ago, you've come a long way. As has your species, in a mere 300 years of industrial development, Thorne replied. Perhaps that is what makes humans unique. Not your technology, or even your adaptability, but your capacity to change your minds, to imagine different futures, and then create them. As the negotiations continued into the night, Thorne found himself contemplating a future he had never before imagined, one where the Vex Empire expanded not through conquest, but cooperation, where strength was measured not by dominion, but by creation. It was a strange new universe that these humans had shown him, one where nothing in the universe made the Vex afraid, except perhaps the prospect of what they might become if they embraced a different path. 6 months after the historic first meeting between Supreme Leader Vox and the human delegation, Admiral Thorne stood in a park in Geneva, watching human children play beneath trees that had survived wars, pollution, climate disasters, and now an alien invasion. Beside him, Ambassador Reynolds observed his reaction with interest. This is what you showed me that day on your ship, Thorne noted. Children, the future. Reynolds nodded. They're why we fought so hard, not for ourselves, but for them, for what they might become. The implementation of the alliance between humanity and the Vex Empire had not been without challenges. Conservative factions among the Vex still viewed cooperation as weakness. Some human groups remained deeply suspicious of their former invaders. But progress was undeniable. Vex technology had accelerated human development in medicine, energy production, and space travel. Human creativity and adaptability had introduced innovations to Vex systems that had remained unchanged for millennia. The Supreme Leader has proposed expanding the alliance to include other species within the Empire, Thorne informed Reynolds. Those we previously subjugated may now be offered partnership instead. A fundamental change in 10,000 years of policy, Reynolds observed. Will your people accept it? Thorne watched as a small girl approached them cautiously, curious about the blue-skinned visitor in her park. He knelt to her level, his massive frame diminished to appear less intimidating. "Hello," he said, the human word still strange on his tongue. The girl studied him with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Your skin glows," she said simply. "It's pretty." Thorne, who had commanded fleets that destroyed civilizations, felt something unfamiliar in his ancient heart, a lightness, a warmth he could not name. "Thank you," he replied. The girl smiled and ran back to her friends, her mission of investigation complete. Rising, Thorne turned back to Reynolds. "Will my people accept change? I do not know. For 10,000 years, we have known only one path. But I have learned from humans that paths can be created where none existed before." "Through hope," Reynolds suggested. "Through hope," Thorne agreed. "The most powerful force in the universe, one we never understood until we met humans." As they walked through the park, the unlikely allies, human ambassador and Vex admiral, contemplated the stars that were just becoming visible in the evening sky. Once, those stars had represented conquest to the Vex and survival to humanity. Now, perhaps, they could mean something new to both civilizations. Possibility. Nothing in the universe had made the Vex afraid until they met humans. And through that meeting, both species had discovered something greater than fear, the power to imagine and create a future unlike any that had come before.